I am Lucy, 35 years old, and until yesterday, I was the finance director at Meridian Tech, a company I helped build from the ground up for 12 years. My dedication never wavered even through the toughest times. Then Ryan Maxwell, our arrogant new CEO, publicly humiliated me and fired me on his first day. What he does not know is that I have a secret that will change everything. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on the CEO who tried to destroy my career, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this corporate revenge story. When I first joined Meridian Tech, I was 23 with a finance degree and big dreams. The company was small then, just 15 employees working in a converted warehouse space with industrial pipes running across the ceiling and temperamental air conditioning. But I saw something special in what we were building. Walter Hayes, our founder, hired me as a financial analyst, though in those early days everyone wore multiple hats. Lucy, I need someone who can see the numbers but understand the vision behind them, Walter told me during my interview. He was already in his 60s then, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Anyone can crunch numbers. I need someone who knows what those numbers mean for real people. That philosophy became my guiding star as I grew with the company. Within 3 years, I was managing our entire accounting department. By year 5, Walter promoted me to finance director with a seat in the leadership team. Through careful financial planning and strategic advice, I helped Walter grow Meridian from a startup with promising technology to a mid-sized company valued at over $200 million with nearly 300 employees. Walter was more than just my boss. He became my mentor, someone I could trust completely. When my father passed away 6 years ago, Walter attended the funeral and sat with my family. When I closed on my first house, he brought a potted plant as a housewarming gift that still thrives in my living room. We celebrated company milestones together, worked through crises side by side, and built something we were both incredibly proud of. The culture at Meridian was special. Walter believed that treating employees with respect and giving them autonomy created better results than micromanagement and fear. Our turnover rate was among the lowest in the industry. People came to Meridian and stayed because they felt valued. The annual company picnic was legendary, with Walter manning the grill and knowing everyone's name and their children's names too. Throughout my years at Meridian, I built close relationships with other key members of the leadership team. Amelia Parker, our HR director, became my best friend. We started within months of each other and bonded over being young women, trying to prove ourselves in a male-dominated industry. David Chen, our operations manager, was the steady, reliable presence who could solve any logistical problem with his calm approach. The three of us formed the core team that Walter relied on most heavily. Then there was Isabella Martinez, our marketing director, brilliant at her job but always seemed to be looking for opportunities to advance her own position. She joined 4 years ago from a larger competitor and brought valuable experience but never quite embraced the collaborative culture Walter had built. While cordial, I always sensed she saw me as competition rather than a colleague. Everything changed 6 months ago when Walter called an all-hands meeting. Standing on the small stage in our cafeteria, he looked suddenly much older than his 72 years. "I have been blessed to build this company with all of you," he said, his voice slightly weaker than we were used to hearing. "But my doctors tell me I need to take retirement seriously this time. I have been diagnosed with a heart condition that requires me to step back from the day-to-day stress of running Meridian." A shockwave went through the room. Walter was Meridian. The idea of the company without him seemed impossible. After the meeting, I went to his office. "Are you really okay?" I asked once we were alone. Walter sighed. "The doctors say, if I take it easy, I could have many good years ahead. But another year of 18-hour days might be the end of me." He looked out the window at the campus we had built. "The board is already interviewing candidates to replace me. I'm staying on through the transition, but my time as CEO is coming to an end." In the months that followed, rumors flew about who would take Walter's place. Many assumed it would be someone internal, perhaps David, or even me. I never campaigned for the position, believing that supporting a smooth transition was more important than my personal ambitions. As the search continued, I noticed Isabella spending more time with certain board members, carefully positioning herself. I did not begrudge her ambition, but I worried about her vision for the company, which often seemed more focused on growth at any cost, rather than sustainable progress. Then the announcement came. The board had selected an outsider, Ryan Maxwell, a Harvard MBA, with an impressive resume of turning companies around and maximizing shareholder value. His previous position was as COO of Vertex Systems, where he had cut costs by 30% and doubled the stock price before the company was acquired. The press release used words like efficiency and streamlined operations that sent a chill down my spine. Walter called me into his office after the announcement. He looked troubled. "Lucy, I fought for a different choice, but I was outvoted. The board sees our growth slowing and they want someone who can boost the numbers quickly." "At what cost?" I asked. Walter shook his head. "That is exactly my concern. Promise me you will do what you can to protect what we have built." "I will." I promised, not knowing then how soon that promise would be tested. 2 weeks before Ryan Maxwell was scheduled to take over as CEO, Walter invited me to his home for dinner. This was not unusual, as we had shared meals many times over the years, often to discuss company strategy away from the office. What was unusual was the formal way Walter extended the invitation and his insistence that I come alone. Walter lived in a beautiful craftsman-style home in a historic neighborhood, a 15-minute drive from our office. When I arrived that evening, I noticed legal papers on his dining room table, but he steered me to the living room first, where his wife Susan had set out appetizers before discreetly excusing herself to visit her sister. "Lucy, I asked you here tonight because I need to discuss something important. Something that must remain between us for now," Walter said as he poured me a glass of wine. His hands trembled slightly, a new development that concerned me. "Of course, Walter. Is everything okay? Is it your health?" I asked. He settled into his favorite leather armchair. "My health is stable as long as I follow doctor's orders, but I am deeply concerned about Meridian's health once this new CEO takes over." I nodded, relieved about his personal health, but sharing his concerns about the company. "The board seems convinced he will take us to the next level." "The next level?" Walter scoffed. "Ryan Maxwell is known for slashing workforces, cutting corners on quality, and pumping up short-term profits to make the company attractive for acquisition. Everything we have worked against." He took a sip of his wine before continuing. "What the board does not know, what no one except my lawyers know, is that I have maintained controlling interest in Meridian. When we went through the last round of financing, I made certain arrangements to ensure I retained 51% of the voting shares." This was news to me. As finance director, I knew our ownership structure was complex, with Walter owning a significant portion but with several investment groups holding substantial stakes. The details of the voting rights had been handled by external counsel during our Series C funding. "So you can override the board's decisions?" I asked, trying to understand the implications. "In theory, yes. But my health won't allow me to wage that fight. The stress would kill me faster than this heart condition." He leaned forward. "Which brings me to why you are here, Lucy. I want to sell my controlling interest to you." I nearly choked on my wine. "Walter, that is. I mean, I am honored, but I could never afford that." He waved his hand dismissively. "I am not asking for market rate. I am proposing a sweetheart deal with very favorable terms. You would make payments over 10 years secured by the shares themselves." Walter stood and retrieved the papers from the dining room. "These documents outline the whole arrangement. The purchase price is significant, but well below what I could get elsewhere. I am doing this because I trust you, Lucy. You understand what Meridian is supposed to be." As I scanned the documents, the numbers made me dizzy. Even at the discounted price Walter was offering, this would be the largest financial commitment of my life. I had savings, but nothing approaching what would be needed for the down payment. "I would need to liquidate my retirement accounts, take a loan against my house," I said, thinking out loud. "I know it is a lot to ask," Walter said, "but if Maxwell succeeds in his likely plan to gut the company and sell it off, your future there is uncertain anyway. This way you have control over your destiny and the company's." "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Talk to my financial advisor." "Of course," Walter said, "but we would need to finalize this before Maxwell officially takes over in 2 weeks, and it must remain completely confidential until after the transition is complete. The legal framework requires a waiting period before the ownership change is announced at the next shareholder meeting." I took the papers home and barely slept that night. The next morning I called Jennifer, my financial advisor, and scheduled an urgent meeting. I could not tell her the specific company involved due to confidentiality, but I outlined the general opportunity. "It is risky," she admitted after reviewing my finances. "You would be leveraged to the hilt. But the terms are exceptionally favorable, And if the company performs even at its current levels, you should be able to manage the payments while maintaining your standard of living. Barely. I spent the next 3 days running numbers, considering scenarios, and weighing the biggest decision of my professional life. What finally tipped the scales was remembering the 300 employees whose livelihoods depended on Meridian remaining the company Walter had built. 5 days before Ryan Maxwell was to take over, I returned to Walter's house with my decision. "I will do it," I told him. "For the company, for the employees, and for you." The relief on his face was immediate. "Thank you, Lucy. I knew I could count on you." We signed the papers that evening with Walter's lawyer and a notary present. According to the agreement, I was now the owner of 51% of Meridian Tech's voting shares, though the official records would not reflect this change until after a mandatory waiting period and formal announcement at the next shareholder meeting scheduled for exactly 1 month after Ryan's start date. As I drove home that night, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I also felt a strange sort of calm. Whatever happened with the new CEO, I now had the power to protect what mattered most about Meridian. I just needed to keep this information completely confidential until the right moment. I had no idea then just how soon my resolve would be tested. The morning Ryan Maxwell was to take over as CEO, the main lobby of Meridian Tech had been transformed. A large welcome banner hung from the balcony, a professional photographer was setting up near the entrance, and a table with coffee and pastries had been arranged for the all-hands meeting, scheduled for 10 o'clock. Isabella, ever the opportunist, was directing the preparations with unusual enthusiasm. "We need to make sure everything is perfect," she instructed the facilities team. "Mr. Maxwell is used to a certain level of professionalism." Her emphasis on professionalism carried the implication that our previous standards had somehow been lacking under Walter. Amelia sidled up next to me as I watched from the periphery. "A bit much, is it not?" she whispered. "You would think we were welcoming royalty instead of a new CEO." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. In the 2 days since signing the papers with Walter, I had been especially careful to maintain a positive, cooperative demeanor. No one, not even Amelia, knew about my new status as majority shareholder. For now, I was still just the finance director, and I needed to play that role convincingly. At precisely 9:30, a black town car pulled up to the entrance. Ryan Maxwell emerged, and my first impression was one of calculated intimidation. He stood 6'2", athletically built in a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary. His dark hair was expensively cut, his shoes gleamed, and his smile never quite reached his cold blue eyes. The executive team was lined up to greet him, with Walter making the introductions. When my turn came, Ryan's handshake was firm but brief, his assessment of me quick and dismissive. "The finance director." "Good. We will need to go through the books thoroughly in the coming days," he said already, turning toward David before I could respond. Isabella received a much warmer greeting, with Ryan commenting on the impressive marketing campaign she had launched the previous quarter. "I have been admiring your work from afar, Miss Martinez. I look forward to seeing what we can accomplish together." The all-hands meeting was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Ryan stood confidently at the podium, his PowerPoint presentation full of upward trending graphs and bold vision statements. "Meridian Tech has been a solid performer in this sector," he began, his voice resonant and practiced. "But in today's market, solid is not enough. We need to be exceptional. We need to be leaders. And to get there, we need to be willing to make tough decisions and embrace change." He outlined his background, emphasizing his Harvard MBA and his track record of transforming underperforming assets into market leaders. Each accomplishment he listed involved significant restructuring and cost-cutting, though he used euphemisms like strategic resource allocation and operational optimization. "In my first 30 days, I will be conducting a comprehensive review of all departments and processes," he continued. "Nothing is off the table. Sacred cows make the best steaks, as they say in the business world." An uncomfortable ripple of nervous laughter moved through the audience. During the question and answer portion, a software engineer asked about potential layoffs, voicing the fear that was clearly on everyone's mind. "I prefer to think in terms of right-sizing our organization," Ryan replied smoothly. "Every position will be evaluated based on its contribution to our bottom line. Those of you who add value have nothing to worry about." I could not help myself. I raised my hand and was recognized. With respect, Mr. Maxwell, our employee retention rate has been a key factor in our consistent growth. Our industry has a high cost of turnover, and our calculations show that our investment in people has yielded significant returns in terms of institutional knowledge and product quality. Ryan's smile tightened. Miss Walker, is it? Peters, I corrected. Lucy Peters. Miss Peters. I appreciate your perspective, but my experience has shown that organizations often become complacent and bloated over time. Fresh blood and new perspectives are valuable. We will make decisions based on data, not sentiment. The dismissal was clear, as was the message. My input was unwelcome. Walter, sitting in the front row as the outgoing CEO who would remain on as chairman of the board during the transition, caught my eye with a subtle nod of appreciation for my attempt. As the meeting concluded, Ryan announced that he had brought in a team of efficiency consultants who would begin working with each department immediately. Think of them as friendly guides helping us find our way to a more streamlined future, he said, with that same smile that never reached his eyes. Within hours, these consultants were everywhere, watching over shoulders, timing processes, asking pointed questions. They wore matching gray suits and carried tablets where they constantly made notes. The atmosphere in the office, usually collaborative and energetic, became tense and fearful. David found me in the break room that afternoon. They have been timing bathroom breaks in the customer service department, he said in a low voice, and asking for detailed justifications for every software license we maintain. Isabella, meanwhile, had already aligned herself with the new regime. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see her laughing at something Ryan said, presenting what looked like new marketing materials that prominently featured his image. By the end of that first day, 3 long-term employees had been let go from the administrative team, their positions deemed redundant in the new organizational structure. They were escorted out by security, a practice never before seen at Meridian. Amelia met me in the parking lot after work, her face drawn with stress. It is like a different company already, she said. I have been told to prepare performance improvement plans for anyone whose productivity metrics fall below the 75th percentile. That is not how performance management should work. What does Walter say? I asked, careful to maintain my cover, as just another concerned executive. He is trying to moderate the worst of it, but Ryan keeps reminding everyone that the board gave him full operational control. Walter's role as chairman is being treated as ceremonial. I nodded, keeping my expression appropriately concerned, but not revealing the anger building inside me. Let us give it time, I said. Maybe things will look different once he understands our culture better. But I did not believe that, and neither did Amelia. As I drove home, I realized that Ryan Maxwell was moving even faster than I had feared. I would need to document everything carefully in preparation for the shareholders meeting still nearly a month away. Until then, I would have to watch the company I loved being dismantled piece by piece. What I did not know yet was how personal this conflict was about to become. 3 days after Ryan Maxwell's arrival, my assistant Jen knocked on my office door with an unusual expression, a mixture of anxiety and sympathy. There is an emergency leadership meeting in the main conference room in 15 minutes, she said. Mr. Maxwell's assistant just called. She said to bring the current fiscal year projections and last quarter's variance reports. I thanked her and gathered the requested materials along with additional data I suspected might be relevant. Something in Jen's expression told me this was not a routine meeting. When I arrived at the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. David gave me a warning look as I took my seat. Amelia's face was carefully blank, the expression she adopted when navigating difficult HR situations. Isabella sat closer to the head of the table than her position would normally warrant already, reviewing what appeared to be presentation materials with Ryan. Walter was noticeably absent, which immediately raised my concerns. As chairman, he should have been included in any emergency leadership discussion. Now that we are all here, Ryan began without preamble. I want to share the restructuring plan my team has developed based on our initial assessment. He nodded to one of his efficiency consultants, who distributed printed presentations to everyone at the table. As I flipped through the document, my stomach tightened. The plan outlined a 30% reduction in workforce, the closure of our research facility in Austin, the cancellation of 3 product lines that were still in development but showed enormous promise, and the outsourcing of our customer support team to a third-party vendor. This is extremely aggressive, David said, his normally calm voice strained. Some of these teams took years to build. Ryan leaned forward. That is precisely the problem. This company has been operating on inertia, doing things a certain way, because that is how they have always been done. We need decisive action to remain competitive. I studied the financial projections included in the presentation and immediately spotted several concerning assumptions. The projected savings failed to account for severance costs, transition expenses, and most importantly, the likely revenue impact of reduced quality and innovation. These numbers do not add up, I said, pulling out my own projections. If I may, I have prepared an alternative analysis that I believe more accurately reflects the financial realities of such dramatic changes. I distributed my documents and began walking through my assessment. While the immediate cost savings appear substantial, the second and third order effects would likely negate those savings within 2 to 3 quarters. Our customer retention modeling shows that our service levels are a key differentiator in the market. Outsourcing support would likely increase churn by 15 to 20%, based on industry benchmarks. Ryan's jaw tightened as I continued my analysis, pointing out the flaws in his team's assumptions and providing data-backed alternatives. I concluded by presenting a more moderate approach that would achieve necessary efficiencies without sacrificing the company's core strengths. Furthermore, the cancellation of the Phoenix project would mean abandoning 18 months of R&D investment just as it is approaching market readiness. Our competitors would gain significant advantage while we— Enough, Ryan interrupted, his voice cutting through the room. He stood up, placing both hands on the table and leaning forward. This is exactly the kind of backward thinking that has kept Meridian from achieving its potential. Sentimental attachments to projects and personnel are not how successful companies operate. This is not about sentiment, I countered, keeping my voice steady. This is about sound financial strategy. The numbers simply do not support this level of restructuring. Ryan's face flushed. The numbers say whatever the person interpreting them wants them to say. My team has analyzed dozens of companies like Meridian, and this plan reflects best practices across the industry. With respect, Mr. Maxwell, Meridian is not like other companies. Our culture and approach are key competitive advantages. The data supports this conclusion. The room had gone completely silent. Even Isabella looked uncomfortable with the growing tension. Ryan straightened up, his expression cold. Miss Peters, how long have you been the finance director here? 12 years, I replied. And in that time, what has been the company's average annual growth rate? Approximately 17%, which is more than double the industry average for our sector. Yet, in the last 2 quarters, that growth has slowed to just 9%, correct? Yes, but that reflects the broader market downturn and our strategic investment in the Phoenix project, which we expect to drive significant growth once launched. Ryan smiled without warmth. Or, it reflects a company that has become complacent, unwilling to make necessary changes to maintain competitiveness. He looked around the table. This is exactly why the board brought me in, to make the hard decisions that the previous leadership was unwilling to make. I felt my professional reputation being dismantled before my colleagues. Mr. Maxwell, I understand the pressure for short-term results, but gutting the company's core strengths for a temporary boost to the balance sheet is not sustainable leadership. It is corporate strip mining. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had crossed a line. Ryan's expression hardened into something dangerous. Miss Peters, he said, his voice now dangerously quiet, it has become abundantly clear to me that you are not a good fit for the direction this company is taking. Excuse me, I said, genuinely shocked by the sudden shift. You are nothing but a waste of payroll, he continued, each word calculated to humiliate. Your outdated thinking is holding this company back, and I will not allow it to continue. He nodded to one of his efficiency consultants who had been standing by the door. Please escort Miss Peters to HR to process her termination, then to her office to collect her personal belongings. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. David started to protest, but was silenced by Ryan's raised hand. This decision is not up for debate. As CEO, I have full authority to make personnel changes as I see fit. Miss Peters' position will be temporarily filled by Isabella until we can bring in someone more aligned with our new direction. Isabella had the decency to look surprised, though I detected a hint of satisfaction beneath her expression of concern. I sat frozen for a moment, the reality of what was happening washing over me. 12 years of dedication ended in an instant with a public humiliation designed to make an example of me. I thought of the papers I had signed with Walter, the secret that I now carried. I could have revealed it then, but something told me that timing would be crucial. I see, I said finally, gathering my materials with as much dignity as I could muster. I will comply with your request, Mr. Maxwell, but I think you may come to regret this decision. I doubt that very much, he replied dismissively. Security will escort you out once you have gathered your things. I walked out of the conference room with my head held high, though inside I was a storm of emotions. Anger, humiliation, shock, and beneath it all, a growing sense of resolve. The consultant followed close behind me as I went to my office. Amelia met me there minutes later, her face stricken. "This is outrageous," she whispered, as she handed me the termination paperwork. "Walter is going to be furious when he finds out. He is at a medical appointment this morning." I signed the papers without comment, knowing that anything I said now would be reported back to Ryan. "It is okay, Amelia," I said quietly. "Some things are beyond our control." As I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, I noticed my coworkers watching through the glass walls of my office, their expressions ranging from shock to sympathy. 12 years of building relationships of shared successes and challenges reduced to an awkward spectacle of cardboard boxes and security escorts. David caught up with me in the parking lot, evading the security guard with a excuse about returning a borrowed book. "This is insane, Lucy. We all know this is about silencing the only person willing to challenge him." I nodded, careful of what I said, given the guard hovering nearby. "Keep an eye on things for me, David, and maybe keep notes on any other significant changes." His eyes narrowed slightly, picking up on my subtext. "You got it. This is not over, is it?" I allowed myself a small smile. "No, it is not. But for now, I need to process what just happened." As I drove home, the professional humiliation gave way to a cold clarity. Ryan Maxwell had no idea who he was dealing with. In less than a month, at the next shareholders meeting, he would learn that I owned 51% of the company. His reign of destruction would be short-lived. But first, I needed to gather evidence and build a case that would convince the board that my leadership approach was the right one for Meridian's future. Ryan had just made a serious tactical error by removing me from the company. Now I could work freely without being under his watchful eye. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was David. "Lucy, I think you should know something. I overheard Ryan on a call after you left. He was talking to someone about accelerating the timeline for selling off the Austin facility. He mentioned something about Tektron being the likely buyer. Is not that our biggest competitor?" The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This was not just about aggressive management tactics. Ryan Maxwell had an agenda that went beyond restructuring. He was positioning Meridian's assets for sale to our competitors. The battle lines were now clearly drawn, and I had exactly 27 days to prepare for the confrontation that would determine Meridian's future. The day after my firing, I woke up at 5:30 in the morning after a fitful night's sleep. For the first time in 12 years, I had nowhere to go. No team depending on me. No meetings scheduled. The silence of my house felt oppressive. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, opening my laptop to begin the fight for Meridian's future. First, I needed to understand exactly who I was dealing with. I spent the morning researching Ryan Maxwell's career in greater detail than the cursory background check I had done previously. A pattern quickly emerged. In his last 3 positions, Ryan had implemented nearly identical playbooks: aggressive cost-cutting layoffs of long-term employees, selling off research divisions, and ultimately positioning the companies for acquisition. In each case, the acquiring companies were competitors or private equity firms that broke up the businesses for parts. I created a secure document to compile my findings, including specific examples of the outcomes at each company. Intron Systems, where he had been CFO, saw its stock price temporarily jump after his restructuring, only to be acquired 6 months later by their largest competitor at a premium. The competitor shut down the company entirely 18 months after that, laying off all remaining staff. Vertex Technologies, where he had been COO, followed a similar pattern, though in that case, the acquiring company kept a skeleton staff to maintain existing client relationships while moving all development offshore. By noon, I was convinced that Ryan had been brought in specifically to prepare Meridian for sale, likely to Tektron, our main competitor, who had been trying to replicate our core technology without success for years. Buying Meridian would be cheaper and faster than developing competing products, especially if they could get it at a discount, after Ryan had slashed the operating costs. I needed allies and more information. I called Walter first, asking if he could meet me for lunch. His voice sounded strained when he answered. I just heard what happened, Lucy. I have been trying to reach board members all morning. We agreed to meet at a small restaurant 20 minutes outside the city, where we were unlikely to encounter anyone from Meridian. Walter looked ashen when he arrived, the stress visibly affecting his health. Ryan told the board you were undermining the transition and had to be removed, he said after we ordered. He painted you as resistant to necessary changes. Several board members called me, asking if I knew you would be so difficult. What did you tell them? I asked. That you are the most rational, data-driven executive I have ever worked with, and if you opposed his plans, there must be solid financial reasons. Walter sighed. But most of them have bought into Ryan's vision of quick returns. They were chosen by our investors specifically because they prioritize short-term gains. I showed Walter my research on Ryan's history. This is not about improving Meridian. This is about stripping it down for easy acquisition. I would bet anything he already has a deal in progress with Tektron. Walter nodded grimly. That matches what I have been hearing through back channels. My friend on Tektron's board hinted they were expecting a market-changing acquisition in the next quarter. We need to gather evidence and build a case before the shareholders meeting, I said. With my controlling interest, I can force a vote to remove him, but I need to convince enough board members that this is the right move for the company. Walter reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I knew I made the right choice with you, Lucy. What do you need from me? Information on any board discussions about acquisition offers, and any documentation about Ryan's hiring process. Was Tektron ever mentioned? Were there discussions about preparing for a sale? I will see what I can find in my emails and notes. Most of these conversations happened in executive sessions, but I may have some relevant documentation. Next, I contacted Michael Richardson, a corporate attorney I had worked with on various Meridian matters over the years. I explained the situation, including my new status as majority shareholder, and retained him to help prepare for the shareholders meeting. We need to document everything Michael advised during our meeting at his office. Any violations of company policy, any decisions that could be considered not in the best interest of the company, any conflicts of interest. We are building a case not just for his removal, but to protect against any potential litigation afterward. With a legal strategy in place, I turned to gathering internal information. Amelia called me that evening, speaking in hushed tones. Lucy, things are getting worse by the hour. Ryan fired 3 more people today, including Jeff from engineering, who has been here almost as long as you. The efficiency consultants are now requiring daily productivity reports from every department. Can you document the changes and any violations of our HR policies? I asked, particularly anything that contradicts our employee handbook or could create legal liability. Already on it, she replied. I am keeping detailed notes of everything. But Lucy, I am worried about my own position. He has been asking pointed questions about my loyalty. Just hang in there a little longer, I assured her. Things will change soon, I promise. David was my next source of internal information. We met at a coffee shop far from the office where he provided me with copies of the latest operational directives. He is systematically dismantling the Phoenix project, David reported, reassigning key engineers, cutting the budget, and I found this in the shared drive. He showed me a document outlining plans to sell the entire research division with Tektron, specifically mentioned as the most synergistic acquirer. This is exactly what I suspected, I said. Can you keep tracking these decisions without putting yourself at risk? David nodded. Most of the team is ready to revolt anyway. They just need to know there is hope for a different outcome. As days passed, the picture became clearer. Through my network of contacts, I learned that Ryan had scheduled meetings with Tektron executives, disguising them as industry networking events. I obtained copies of financial projections he had prepared that dramatically undervalued Meridian's assets and intellectual property, presumably to justify a lower sale price. The most surprising information came from an unexpected source. Isabella contacted me 1 week after my firing, asking to meet privately. I have made a terrible mistake, she admitted when we met at a park bench far from any potential observers. I thought aligning myself with Ryan was the smart career move, but I did not understand his real agenda. Which is I prompted, curious what had changed her perspective. He is not planning to keep any of the leadership team after the acquisition. I saw an org chart on his desk during a meeting. Every current director position had TBD, or a Tektron executive's name on it. She handed me a flash drive. These are copies of communications about the acquisition plan. He has been working on this since before he even started at Meridian. I was cautious. Why are you sharing this with me now? Isabella looked away. I have been ambitious, yes, even opportunistic. But I care about what we built at Meridian. And… She hesitated. I was wrong about you, Lucy. You were always fair to me, even when I was positioning myself against you. This company needs leadership that values what we have created. The flash drive contained damning evidence, including emails between Ryan and Tektron executives, dating back 3 months, discussing how to structure the acquisition to maximize their gains while minimizing payouts to Meridian shareholders. Most troubling were discussions about how to devalue Meridian's stock price temporarily to reduce the acquisition cost. With 2 weeks left before the shareholders' meeting, I compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive presentation. Michael helped me organize it into a compelling narrative that clearly demonstrated Ryan's conflicts of interest and breach of fiduciary duty. Walter provided historical context and board communications that showed Ryan had misrepresented his intentions during the hiring process. As the meeting approached, I practiced my presentation repeatedly, anticipating Ryan's likely counterarguments. The stakes could not be higher, not just for me personally, but for the 300 employees whose livelihoods depended on Meridian's continued independence. The night before the meeting, Walter called me. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied, my stomach tight with anticipation. "Lucy, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You have shown more courage and integrity than most people demonstrate in a lifetime." His words bolstered my confidence, but as I tried to sleep that night, doubts crept in. What if the board sided with Ryan despite the evidence? What if my presentation failed to convince them? What if my leadership was rejected? I pushed these thoughts away and focused on what I knew to be true. Meridian was worth fighting for, and I was the right person to lead that fight. Tomorrow would determine whether the company Walter and I had built together would continue to thrive or be dismantled for parts. With that resolve firmly in mind, I finally drifted off to sleep, ready for the confrontation that awaited me. The morning of the shareholders' meeting, I dressed with particular care, choosing a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and authority. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, a good luck charm I saved for important occasions, I reminded myself that today was not about personal vindication. It was about saving Meridian Tech and everyone who depended on it. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock at the Grand Meridian Hotel, ironically named, similar to our company but unaffiliated. I arrived 45 minutes early to set up my presentation and review my notes one final time. Michael Richardson, my attorney, met me in the lobby. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as we walked toward the conference room. "More than ready," I replied. "It is time to end this." The large conference room was arranged with a long table at the front for the board members and CEO, with rows of chairs for shareholders and observers. Most of Meridian's shares were held by a small group of investors, with Walter's 51% now legally mine, though this fact remained confidential until the formal announcement today. Board members began arriving, greeting each other with the comfortable familiarity of people who had worked together for years. Several nodded politely to me, though I could read the discomfort in their expressions. To them, I was still the finance director who had been fired for insubordination, now awkwardly appearing at a shareholders' meeting. At 8:50, Ryan Maxwell entered with Isabella close behind him. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me, then recovered with a dismissive smile. "Miss Peters," he said, approaching me with feigned cordiality. "This is a shareholders' meeting. I am afraid you will need to leave." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I have every right to be here." Before he could respond, Walter arrived, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement before taking his seat at the table. Ryan, clearly annoyed but unwilling to create a scene, moved to the front of the room to prepare his own presentation. At precisely 9 o'clock, Walter called the meeting to order in his capacity as chairman of the board. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this quarterly shareholders meeting. We have several items on the agenda today, including a performance update from our CEO, Ryan Maxwell, and a special announcement." Ryan stood and launched into his presentation, outlining the transformative changes he had implemented in his short tenure. He described the staff reductions as necessary efficiencies and the cancelled projects as strategic realignments. His slides showed cost savings and projected improvements to the bottom line, all presented with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to managing perceptions rather than creating value. In conclusion, he said, after 20 minutes of corporate doublespeak, Meridian is now positioned for a more competitive future, with streamlined operations and a clear path to increased shareholder value. Several board members nodded appreciatively. Isabella, seated in the second row, maintained a carefully neutral expression. "Thank you, Mr. Maxwell Walter," said when Ryan finished. "Before we move to questions, we have an important announcement regarding company ownership." He turned to me. "Miss Peters, would you like to come forward?" Ryan's expression shifted from confidence to confusion as I stood and walked to the front of the room. The board members exchanged puzzled glances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walter continued, 2 weeks prior to Mr. Maxwell assuming the role of CEO, I completed a private transaction that has now cleared all legal requirements for formal announcement. I transferred my controlling interest in Meridian Tech 51% of voting shares to Lucy Peters. The room erupted in murmurs. Ryan's face drained of color as the implications sank in. "This is impossible," he stammered. There was no filing, no disclosure. Michael stepped forward, handing copies of the filed paperwork to the corporate secretary. "The transaction was entirely legal and has now been properly recorded with the SEC. The timing of the disclosure complies with all regulatory requirements." Ryan turned to Walter, his composure cracking. "You did this deliberately. You set me up." Walter remained calm. "I transferred my shares to the person I believed would best steward this company's future. That decision has proven even more prescient than I anticipated." "Miss Peters," Walter continued, "as the majority shareholder, you have the floor." I took my place at the podium, meeting the shocked gazes of the board members directly. "Thank you, Walter. As the majority shareholder of Meridian Tech, I have called for a vote today on the leadership of this company." I connected my laptop to the projector. "But before we vote, I believe the board deserves to understand exactly what has been happening since Mr. Maxwell took control." For the next 30 minutes, I presented the evidence we had gathered, the documented pattern from Ryan's previous positions, the secret meetings with Tektron, the internal emails discussing how to devalue Meridian for easier acquisition, the org charts showing the planned elimination of the entire leadership team post-acquisition. With each slide, the board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to outrage. In summary, I concluded Mr. Maxwell was not hired to strengthen Meridian, but to prepare it for a fire sale to our largest competitor, who has failed to replicate our technology through their own R&D efforts. This acquisition would result in the dismantling of what we have built, the loss of hundreds of jobs, and a fraction of the long-term value this company could generate independently. Ryan attempted to interject several times, but Walter firmly maintained order, insisting that I be allowed to complete my presentation. "This is absurd," Ryan finally burst out when I finished. "These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former employee who clearly has a personal vendetta against me." "The evidence speaks for itself," I replied calmly. "But we also have testimony." I nodded to the back of the room where Amelia, David, and to Ryan's visible shock, Isabella stood. One by one, they came forward to corroborate different aspects of my presentation. Amelia detailed the HR violations and the destruction of company culture. David outlined the systematic dismantling of our most promising projects. And finally, Isabella confirmed the secret negotiations with Tektron. I was initially supportive of the new direction, Isabella admitted. But when I discovered the true agenda was to sell us off for parts, I knew I had to speak up. This company deserves better than to be stripped down and sold to the highest bidder. Ryan's face had progressed from pale to flushed with anger. "This is a coordinated attack based on stolen confidential information. These people should be investigated for corporate espionage, not listened to." "Mr. Maxwell," I said, facing him directly, "for the first time the day you fired me, you called me a waste of payroll and claimed my outdated thinking was holding the company back. Today, as the majority shareholder of Meridian Tech, I am calling for a vote to remove you as CEO effective immediately." Walter formally presented the motion to the board. "As chairman, I call for a vote on the removal of Ryan Maxwell from the position of Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Tech based on the evidence presented regarding breach of fiduciary duty and actions contrary to the company's best interests." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 7 board members voted for removal, with only 2 voting against. Ryan sat frozen as Walter announced the result. "Ryan Maxwell, you are hereby removed as CEO of Meridian Tech, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises, and oversee the return of all company property. As if on cue, two security officers entered the room, the same ones who had escorted me out less than a month earlier. The symmetry was not lost on anyone present. Ryan stood slowly, his composure completely shattered. "You will regret this," he said, looking from me to Walter to the board members. "I have contacts throughout this industry. None of you will." "That is enough," Mr. Maxwell, Walter interrupted. "Please leave with dignity." As Ryan was escorted out, the board turned to the question of interim leadership. Walter nominated me to serve as acting CEO until a permanent decision could be made. "Miss Peters has demonstrated exceptional judgment, courage, and commitment to this company's true values," he said. "I believe she is the right person to guide us through this transition." The vote was unanimous in my favor. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached to congratulate me and express their shock at what they had learned. Several apologized for not seeing through Ryan's facade earlier. Isabella approached me last, her expression uncertain. "I owe you an apology, Lucy. I let ambition cloud my judgment." "We all make mistakes," I replied. "What matters is that you did the right thing in the end. We have a lot of rebuilding to do, and I will need a strong marketing team to help restore confidence in our brand." Her relief was visible. "Thank you for the second chance." As the room cleared, Walter and I remained taking in the momentous shift that had just occurred. "Well," he said, with a tired smile, "that was quite a shareholders meeting." "The most exciting one in company history, I would guess," I replied. "Thank you for trusting me with your legacy, Walter." He shook his head. "It is not my legacy anymore, Lucy. It is yours now, and I cannot wait to see what you build with it." As we walked out together, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders, but also a profound sense of possibility. Meridian had survived its greatest threat, and now we could begin the work of healing and growing again. My phone buzzed with a message from Amelia's staff is buzzing with rumors. "When can you address them?" I smiled as I typed my response. "Tell them the new CEO will hold an all-hands meeting at 3 o'clock. It was time to bring Meridian back to life. My first official act as acting CEO of Meridian Tech was to address the entire company. At precisely 3 o'clock that afternoon, I stood in the same spot where just weeks earlier Ryan Maxwell had outlined his vision of corporate efficiency above all else. The contrast was not lost on me as I looked out at the anxious, hopeful faces of my colleagues. Today marks a new chapter for Meridian. I began deliberately avoiding corporate jargon. Some of you may be confused by the sudden leadership change. Others might be wondering what this means for the direction we have been taking recently. Let me be clear. Meridian Tech is returning to the principles that made us successful while embracing positive change that will help us grow stronger. Over the next hour, I outlined immediate actions, a pause on all layoffs, a review of recent terminations with the possibility of rehiring valuable team members, and a recommitment to the Phoenix project that Ryan had been dismantling. The visible relief in the room was palpable. We faced challenges, I acknowledged. The past month has created uncertainty, both internally and with our clients. Rebuilding trust will take time and consistent effort from all of us. But I believe in what we have built here, and I believe in each of you. After the meeting, Amelia stayed behind to help me plan our next steps. "We should start with contacting the people who were let go," she suggested, "especially Jeff from engineering and the Austin research team. They are essential for the Phoenix project." By the end of that first week, we had rehired 15 key employees and stabilized the most critical projects that had been disrupted. David took charge of revitalizing the Austin facility, which had been days away from closure. Isabella worked tirelessly to reassure our clients that Meridian's products and support would continue uninterrupted. The weekend after that whirlwind first week, I visited Walter at his home. He looked better than he had in months, the stress visibly lifting from his features. "You have accomplished more in 5 days than most executives do in 5 months, he said as we sat on his back porch. "How does it feel to be in the big chair?" "Overwhelming," I admitted, "but also right somehow. Like this is what I was meant to do, even if I never saw it coming." Walter nodded. "That is how I felt when I founded the company. Terrified but certain." He sipped his tea. "I knew you were the right choice, Lucy." When the board was interviewing CEO candidates, I kept thinking none of them understood what makes Meridian special. "Why did not you just offer me the position directly?" I asked a question that had been lingering in my mind. "Would you have taken it?" Walter replied with a knowing smile. You never seemed interested in the CEO role when we discussed succession planning. You always said you preferred working with the financial side of the business." He was right. I had never seen myself as CEO material, always believing my strengths were better applied in a supporting role. It took this crisis to show me capabilities I had not recognized in myself. Besides, Walter continued this way, you have both leadership authority and ownership control. That gives you a level of security I never had. No board can remove you on a whim. The following Monday, I began the harder work of examining which of Ryan's changes might actually benefit the company. As much as I disagreed with his methods and ultimate goals, I had to acknowledge that not every idea was without merit. Some of our processes had become inefficient, I admitted during a leadership team meeting, and our project approval system did need more rigor. We can implement these improvements without sacrificing our culture or mistreating our people. We developed a balanced approach, keeping the structural improvements while rejecting the slash and burn mentality. Our financial discipline became stronger without becoming our only consideration. We found a middle ground between Walter's pure focus on culture and Ryan's obsession with metrics. One of my most difficult decisions involved Isabella. Despite her ultimate choice to stand with the company, her initial eagerness to align with Ryan had revealed character concerns. "I want to keep you on the leadership team," I told her during a private meeting, "but I need to know that your loyalty is to Meridian, not to whoever happens to be in power." "I understand," she replied, "and I deserve that skepticism. I chose ambition over integrity, and I have been doing a lot of reflection on why. If you give me this chance, I will prove that I have learned from my mistake." I decided to keep her as marketing director, but implemented a probationary period with clear expectations about transparency and teamwork. It was a risk, but her talents were valuable, and I believed in second chances when people demonstrated genuine remorse. By the end of the first month, we had regained stability. The board formally removed my acting status, confirming me as the permanent CEO. We held a company-wide celebration, not just of my appointment, but of Meridian's resilience and renewed direction. During that celebration, I found myself standing with Amelia and David, watching our team members laughing, and talking with a renewed sense of security and purpose. "You know what I keep thinking about," Amelia said. "The look on Ryan's face when he realized you owned the company. I have never seen someone deflate so completely." "Corporate karma," David added with a smile. "He tried to publicly humiliate you, and the universe returned the favor tenfold." I shook my head. This was never about revenge for me. It was about protecting what matters. The best revenge is not making someone suffer, it is showing them they were wrong about you. And that was the truth. While I could not deny a certain satisfaction in the symmetry of Ryan's downfall, my greater satisfaction came from seeing Meridian flourish again. The Phoenix project moved back into full development. Our company culture rebounded with employee satisfaction scores climbing each week. Clients who had been nervous about the direction under Ryan expressed relief and renewed commitment. 6 months after taking over as CEO, I invited Walter to join a board meeting where we unveiled the completed Phoenix project to enthusiastic response. The technology we had developed would open entirely new markets for Meridian, with projected revenue growth that validated our patient approach to innovation. After the presentation, Walter pulled me aside. "You have exceeded even my highest expectations, Lucy. Meridian is stronger now than it has ever been." "We still have challenges ahead," I admitted. "Tektron is developing competing technology, and the market is getting more crowded." "But you will face those challenges the right way," Walter said confidently. "By building rather than destroying. By valuing the people who make this company what it is." That evening, alone in my office, I reflected on everything that had happened. The humiliation of being fired had led to the greatest opportunity of my career. The crisis had revealed strengths I had not known I possessed. The conflict had clarified what truly mattered about Meridian Tech. I had learned that leadership is not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and listening to diverse perspectives. That financial success means little if it comes at the cost of your values and your people. That sometimes the most difficult moments in life become pivots that lead to unexpected growth. Most importantly, I had learned that when you stand up for what you believe in, even when it seems hopeless, you discover what you are truly capable of. As I turned off the lights in my office, I thought about all the employees who would return tomorrow, trusting in the direction we were taking together. That trust was the most valuable asset Meridian possessed, worth more than any technology or balance sheet figure. My job was to honor that trust every day through decisions both large and small. The company Ryan had dismissed as outdated was now innovating faster than ever. The culture he had tried to dismantle was proving to be our greatest competitive advantage. And the finance director he had called a waste of payroll was now leading Meridian into its most promising chapter yet. Life has a funny way of coming full circle sometimes. Have you ever experienced a situation where something that seemed terrible at the time ended up creating an unexpected opportunity? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this corporate comeback story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful triumphs. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that standing up for your values is always worth it in the end, even when the path gets difficult.